Welcome to the Righteous Riffs Headliners Show with Eric Walker and Stephen Lee Adams. And now, here are your hosts, Stephen Lee Adams and Eric Walker.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Righteous Riffs Headliner Show. I am Eric.
I'm Stephen.
And today we're going to a galaxy far, far away. We have a special guest, Den, on our show. And Den is becoming quite the popular musician writing songs that are inspired by the Star Wars universe. He first came onto the scene with a song called Rebel Girl, which is a great video, and you should all check it out. And last week, he released his second single, which is also inspired by the Star Wars universe. It's called Desert Planet. And we're quite excited. The music video came out last week for Desert Planet, and the single for Desert Planet's going to be on iTunes and Amazon, Spotify, everywhere this Friday, the 23rd. So everybody be sure to go there, download his music, help support this great musician. And we're very pleased to have him on the show. So everybody, please welcome Den.
Hey, Eric. Hey, Steve.
Hey, how's it going, man? Welcome to the show.
Really good. Great. It's great to be here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we're quite excited. You write a lot of music that's inspired by Star Wars, and I have a little bit of a past with Star Wars myself. I'm the original Mace, the OM. And now I do music, which is exciting. But how long have you been a musician? When did you pick up? Do you play any instruments or?
Just so your listeners know, I was listening to your song "Brand New Day" before the show, and it actually got me in a really positive headspace to do this. So that's great. It's great to be talking to other musicians about music. I think I posted on Instagram a pic of me as a 2.5-year-old listening to music on my dad's stereo with massive 70s headphones, and it was my favorite thing in the world since I could remember. And then at about 15, I picked up the guitar, and within a month, I think I wrote a song. Even without really knowing what I was doing too much, I found that my hands would just kind of find the right place on the guitar, the right notes that were expressing how I was feeling. And then my best friend in high school, who was a virtuoso guitar player, taught me how to play rhythm guitar. And I've been writing songs and playing in bands since then.
Oh, awesome,
man.
I think Steve is a bass player. I think you mentioned to me one time you started with guitar and then you moved over to bass.
I
but
did.
yeah.
Yep.
Den, is there any other instruments you play other than guitar?
Not really. I can play bass. If I were to play in a band without being a vocalist, I would prefer playing bass over guitar. I'm a rhythm guitar player, and I love rhythm. I think people don't give that enough respect, because you really can affect the feel of a recording or a live performance by being on with your bassist and drummer.
Exactly.
And I think the bass is just maybe just a sexier, more fun way to play rhythm guitar. You could when you could just focus on a couple of notes or one note at a time. When I jam with my friends, which is sometimes weekly, I love to pick up the bass and jam, just to jam and have fun.
My philosophy on that is, the bass and the drums and the guitar, I look at an ice cream cone, right? So for me, the cone itself is the drums. The ice cream on top of that's the bass player. And then, the fun flavors, if you will, the sprinkles and all that would be the guitar. Does that make sense?
Sure, and I guess the vocalist is the tongue that looks at
that. Exactly. Completely.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the rhythm guitar and bass are the two most important things in a song.
You got to have that foundation,
Right, it definitely drives the song. It's what makes you want to get up and move, for sure. So,
when I learned how to play guitar, I wanted to be a lead player, and I quickly learned that was not going to happen. So I learned to love rhythm, and I do to this day.
Awesome.
Now, when you start to write a song, whether it be a Star Wars-based universe or other music, and I understand your album's going to have other, when it drops, it's going to have other songs as well. When you first start writing a song, how do you start? Do you start with lyrics or you start with music?
I always start with emotion. So that's been the way it's always been since I was 15, where if I've just, like most musicians, I'm a really emotional person. So I find that the only good songs I've ever written come when I'm feeling something strongly, and I'll start humming I'll just put my hands on the guitar and let my hand go to the right chord. I'll just sort of move my hand around, and whatever note resonates, I'll start there. And then it's almost like magic. I can't really explain. Anytime I've tried to sit down and write a song, I've tried to write a song in that, what's that pattern called that there's like 40 number one hit singles written in it.
It's the four chord songs. Yeah.
Yeah. I've written one of those, and it just, it was an exercise, and it was a strong melody, because you can't not write a strong melody with those four chords, but it didn't resonate because it hadn't come from that emotional place. So I read that actually the early punk songwriters, became an interesting experiment for them, was because they didn't really know theory, even the basic blues stuff like 1-4-5. They would just throw their hands around the fretboard in the power chord and see where it ended up, and they would let that convey what they were feeling, and that's where you got like the really dissonant or the really untraditional chord progressions in punk,
right?
The jarring stuff. And great songwriters like Kurt Cobain used that. He mixed that with some technical knowledge of good chord forms, and so that I kind of do that. I let my hand just go where it use the force, I guess.
There you go. That's the force. Yeah. Speaking, since you brought up the Nirvana singer Kurt, who is your favorite artist, living or dead?
Okay, so right off the bat, Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, though that didn't happen until a few years after they were big, because when they first broke, they were one of those acts that was too big, and they were just too everywhere for me to even, when something's too big, sometimes you don't really have an objective view of it. Since I was a child, the Joshua Tree was a favorite album.
Oh, that's a great album.
Yeah, because it did something to me that Star Wars did, which was it gave me that spiritual expression or outlet in a pop format. So, really, since I was a kid, Star Wars and Joshua Tree were the two things. And then there's Neil Young, a fellow Canadian. There's a Canadian band called the Tragically Hip. Most Americans don't know of them.
I have heard of them.
They have been really well respected and loved by a lot of Americans and a lot of people in pockets around the world. But here they're the biggest band in Canada. And the singer, who was my main influence since 15, I saw their video in 1989 on TV, on Much Music Up Here. And this was before grunge. So everything to me, I didn't relate to, as much as I love Def Leppard now and stuff like that, I didn't relate to hair metal or Bryan Adams and a lot of the bigger top 40 rock. And then the Tragically Hip came along, and they were this Canadian version of a weird sort of combination of the Doors meets the Rolling Stones meets R.E.M. And really raw. They were kind of like representing, because there was a lot of bands doing the raw thing that grunge became in 91.
Right.
Before it broke. And they were one of them. And so I even remember when Pearl Jam came in 91, I went to see their first headlining show in Toronto. And in their interview, they talked about how they wanted to, check out the Hip while they were up here, because they were already respected by American bands. And actually, last year when Gord Downie, the singer, did his last concert, he did it after having surgery for brain cancer. It was it was like the most inspiring tour I've ever seen. He did a cross Canada tour with his band, but during that day of their last show, even Eddie Vedder was playing a show and with Pearl Jam, and he's talked about Gord from the stage. It ties into the Star Wars stuff because they're really poetic, meat and potatoes bar band along with like the poetic and the really artistic side of, say like the Doors or a band like REM or, even U2. And in Canada, they sort of defined a rock and roll that spoke to our culture and mythology and created a mythology for it that no band had really done yet.
Right.
And I guess you have to be Canadian to get that. So that's one of the reasons why they haven't really broke big around the world. But here they mean everything. But in their songs, hockey will sometimes be a theme.
Right.
And we're trying to...
Canadian thing, right?
Yeah. And they love hockey. And even my older brother in a men's league played against the singer from the Hip Chord. But yeah, it's such a small country up here, really. Everyone knows everyone in a way. But like that, F-105, we're trying to, tie in Star Wars, sort of like how the hip tie in hockey. So we're not a Star Wars band, but it's poetry and kind of the mythology of it is part of our makeup.
Great. So, so the name of the group is F-105. I know when in the beginning, I introduced you as Den, and that's your name, your stage name, but the name of the group is F-105.
Yeah, it's the designation of a legendary Canadian jet from the 50s that was the CF-105 Avro Arrow.
Right.
And it was decades ahead of its time in terms of tech. And the next government that was bitter towards the government that produced that canceled it out of spite, and all our talent left to the States. And they eventually worked in NASA and created the F-16. So it's just kind of the Avro Arrow at CF-105 is kind of a mythic thing up here.
Okay. And with that, let's go ahead and the singles the video's already dropped, but the single's coming out this Friday, the 23rd. It's called Desert Planet. Let's go ahead and listen to F-105 and Desert Planet. And that was F-105 and Desert Planet. Wow, what a great song. It tells a story of the desert planet and all the happenings there, and you get to see a lot of cool stuff from Rebels and Star Wars. So definitely check out the video, F-105 Desert Planet, and make sure you get the single that's coming out Friday. It also comes with Rebel Girl, which we'll play later in the show. But Dan, we were talking about the Star Wars universe, but one of the questions I like to ask all of our people that we have on the show is, how many songs have you written?
Oh, I did. I did have a number a few months ago, but I forgot. Last August, I got into an accident and I had a severe concussion, and I'm forgetting everything. But I do know that we've made 5 albums.
Wow.
And this is
Okay.
our 6th. But the story is, the former group was called The Souls, S-O-L-E-S, and we made 5 albums. And we had our big breakthrough in the Star Wars community globally through the podcast Rebel Force Radio, and we had written a song by that title, which included, the hero's journey, which was the DNA of Star Wars, really, and how George Lucas rewrote the script with the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell.
Right.
And then the experiment worked because that was the first song that really connected with the global audience.
That's a great show. That's a great show. I'm big fans of that show. Jimmy Mack is great, love those guys. So,
yeah, it is a great show. Maybe you've heard the song on there. It would play every week. Now you've got your own show, Rebel Force Radio, and when I played the Bash in Anaheim at their Celebration Bash in Anaheim,
right,
years ago, the audience sang the chorus, which was the first time that ever happened. Really, it was like a sold-out room, so that was the first in my life, and that was mind-blowing.
That's
so
cool.
I really owe this all to those guys, and but the Souls was more my just band. I had members in and out over almost a 15-year period,
right,
and then 2 of those guys, which one of them was my producer of our last 3 albums. And he would also play on tour with us as, I had hired tour members. But the last Souls tour, him, Mark, myself, and the drummer Alex, who was with us on tour, we realized we had something together and we wanted to start fresh. And so F-105 is sort of an evolved reimagining of the Souls in a way.
Sure. Okay. Now, when you're working on an album, do you try to do like a whole concept of an album, or do you just get in the studio, start writing songs, and then, I know for myself, when I start working on an album, you mentioned Brand New Day earlier. What a lot of people don't realize is I actually took about 30 songs and dwindled it down to the 12 that are on the album. Is that the same process with you, or do you write more songs for the album and then just decide what fits, or how does that process work?
It is similar. I think that every album I've done is a concept album, just in the sense that I think that way in terms of at least themes connecting to each other. So maybe not classic concept albums, but they are basically one concept, one idea that's going to tie it all together. So usually the songs are a combo of noticing the best things that I had written over the past few years, and sometimes even, my demos, I'll go back, a decade or 2 and see which songs, just sort of which songs fit together and which songs were maybe going into the concept that I currently have, because you tend to find former stuff that you wrote were seeds of where you ended up. You didn't know it at the time.
Right. That's true. And I
You want the album to tie together. All the songs to tie together to create one big story. Is that correct?
Yeah. And then that's part of the excitement, isn't it? Because you start going, oh, that's what I was on about then, or that's what I was reading about. And I really feel, even more strongly about it now. And I have these new songs that, they connect like that. And then sometimes I'll have to change, certain lyrics to fit. So actually, the Rebel Force Radio song at first was a song called First Light, and we had a few demos of it. And then when Jimmy had asked for a song, he asked for like a jingle. But I said, I can't make you a jingle. I got to make art, but I don't know what the art's going to be until it hits me on the head. So a year later, it hit me on the head. Wait, I've been studying Joseph Campbell for 10 years. I'm going to make a hero's journey song about, Jimmy and Jason and their show, and just make it, feel like Star Wars, and not mention, I don't want to, not like Led Zeppelin brings in, Gollum and Lord of the Rings mythology. I wanted to create the Rebel Force radio song to feel like mythology, to feel like Star Wars, to feel like the podcast, but to never mention anything literally, so that it would work universally, I think, for non-fans.
Right.
And maybe I felt like that takes me away more. If a song makes me, turns the world around me into my myth, like I'm the character and here's my myth, I'm walking, maybe listening to this song walking by a big building in Toronto, and it reminds me of, the Tower of Barad-dûr or something, but I don't want to mention the Tower of Barad-dûr. I want it to feel like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And that's what I think Desert Planet and Rebel Girl do too.
Yeah, I know. A lot of times when I'm working on, you try to do a theme, and then you're working on, and then sometimes that theme changes. Like you might end up going in a different direction. Do you find that happening sometimes as well?
Yeah. So First Light, at that time, that song was about the first light of the Big Bang, kind of the interconnectivity of all matter, and then the theme changed into the hero's journey of two guys doing a podcast, and then really, which I hope anyone could relate to, as a metaphor for them finding their own thing in life, and but when that moment comes where you're working on a new album and a new concept, and you have to start reworking stuff and editing and changing lyrics and sounds to make it all fit together into a cohesive concept, that's what I love the most.
For sure, for sure. This new album that's coming out, when do you expect it to drop, and how many other songs do you expect to have on it?
Well, it'll be 9 songs, and it was going to be 8, but a festival in Canada that I can't mention because we just haven't signed papers yet is going to have us play at the end of July, and we're going to release the album that day for that performance this summer. The funny thing is, I can mention the theme of their festival, which was Courage to blank. So musicians and the people attendants there, they have to be cognizant of this theme, courage to whatever in life. And they want artists to respond. And then the funny thing was, the 9th song I wanted on the album is called Courage 2.
Interesting.
Wow.
Which...
Wow.
But in the use of 2 as an also, it was really weird, because Gord Downey, the singer I was talking about up here, who passed away this year, they had 2 famous songs, one called Courage and one called Grace 2, which are 2 of the biggest, most iconic songs in Canada.
Right.
And then so in his last tour, where he had the courage to go on the road with brain cancer, where doctors even told him he couldn't or shouldn't. I just felt like, wow, I had this notion of, wow, you're giving us so much courage. I wish I, at some point, could have known you were giving you courage too. It's a weird sort of thought I had that I turned into a song. And then the festival, I let them hear the demo, and they loved it so much. They were like, can we use this as our theme song? And can you put it on the album? And can we cross promote? So
right. Cool.
That's cool.
Well, everything in life happens for a reason, and you mentioned Courage. The name of the foreign title of the movie I was in was called Caravan of Courage. So, I
do remember. Yeah. Of course, I watched that when I was a kid too. That's what I love about this Star Wars world and how great this community of people is. That people like you that I knew of. From movies I admired as a kid, now all of a sudden I'm talking to on a podcast.
Yeah,
Star Wars community is just the greatest, really. Actually.
It's the biggest in the world, but it's also the smallest, and everybody kind of connects to each other. So,
Yeah.
They really do.
And when do you think your next single is going to be out? I think you mentioned something about a festival. Are you going to wait to release singles when the whole album drops, or?
Well, we have our 3rd video in the can already, which I'm also a visual artist. So I spent a month doing drawings for that video. So the video will tell the story of a song in drawings, and that's called No Man's Land. That's not a Star Warsy song, but in a weird way now it also kind of evokes No Man's Land, the scene from Wonder Woman. But it's a slow, pretty song about First Nations stuff in Canada, which has always been Mark, our producer and band member. He's half First Nations. It's always been a big theme for us.
Right.
That'll come out on June 21st, which is Aboriginal Day in Canada, and then Courage 2 will come out the end of July in conjunction with the festival.
Great. I know on a couple of my albums, I think I wrote one song that was inspired. It was called Return to Endor, which is about the planet Endor and my character. But you don't always write. I don't always write songs based on it, but I always write songs that are inspired by things. You know, like if not My Journeys, then I had another song called Pandora, which was about the movie Avatar. So, and it's always great to get inspiration from real life events. Is that where you find you get most of your inspiration from, or?
Oh yeah, real life, definitely. Speaking of which, I'll go listen to Return to Endor when we're done this conversation, because that's real life. I think all this stuff comes from real life. Desert Planet, though, I had to, chisel it and mold it into something that felt Star Warsy in tone.
Right.
Really, it comes from an internal place that I've had over the last few years of trying to maybe get rid of the noise in life in my own, I guess, for lack of a better word on air. I don't want to alienate people. It's spiritual,
sure,
for people who aren't spiritual. But my spiritual journey of just trying to, get rid of the noise and the things I don't need, and down to the essentials of who I really am. And to me, that's what the desert symbol is, and all that mythology and storytelling, from the biblical stuff to Star Wars to Dune. It's really when you're stripped of everything, you don't, like the line in the song says, there's nothing to see but who you are, surrounded by nothing but the dark, and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of that, so we've talked a lot about Desert Girl, but let's go ahead and listen to the first single. This is F-105 and Rebel Girl.
It's easier to keep her head down. She looks at you strange when you say this hoe. That's how rebellions work, don't you know? Someone to stand by his side. We all have a world where we want to hide. In the desert sun that you made home. And all your life you felt so alone. So alone, so alone, so alone. Rebel girl.
That was F-105 and Rebel Girl here on the Righteous Riffs Headliners Network. Wow, what a great song. Love that bass line. What do you think of that bass line, Steve?
Dude, that was killer. I love that. I love good, tasty bass lines, man.
Yeah, because we were talking about that. That's one of the only bass lines I've ever written for the groups. And it just popped in my head one day, that line. I don't know where it came from. I was listening to a lot of Doors at the time, so I think something from...
Yeah, definitely I definitely see that influence.
Yeah.
It just in the feel, because I went through a crazy Doors phase in high school, then again a couple years ago, and that song started as I was trying to write a LA woman for Toronto called Toronto Girl, and when I was playing it and demoing it, I even traveled across Canada, played 20 shows playing it, and it wasn't hitting that LA woman type of place I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I was trying to make it that, and then all of a sudden the lyrics to Rebel Girl hit me, and I wanted to change it. It felt like I'm actually a part of this Star Wars community, you know?
Sure.
And instead of trying to make us, like, it has embraced me with people all over the world, and us more than our city and country has. So when the lyrics to Rebel Girl hit me, when the chorus hit, I just started going Rebel Girl, because at the time I was just really loving Rey and Jyn in Star Wars and everything that was happening in pop culture with female characters. You know, when I talk about this, it's like, as an artist, it was like, as a human, it was just like, this isn't politics for me. It was just like, I know these stories of these women exist. I just want to see those up there as an artist and a human. Like, it was more exciting to see something that I haven't seen before. You know, I want to see new stuff. I want to hear new stuff. I want to experience new things through art. So that was really exciting. And Rebel Girl just automatically, and then Rebel Force Radio debuted it, and it connected automatically. So that was the right thing to do, which was really just to be honest to myself instead of trying to do something like Doors and hopefully have it embraced by the city. Just go where
Right.
have already been accepted, you know, as part of something.
Well, yeah, and I love some of the new strong female characters in Star Wars. It's about time. I mean, it's not that they didn't have any. Leia was pretty strong, but you know, it's nice to see.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see, you know, in Rogue One, you know, how strong she had to, you know, Jyn had to, you know, raise herself practically on the street, and just that struggle. It's real and it's great. So.
And I think the thing is, at the time, I have a niece who's 11, who at the time was 9 when Force Awakens came out. And then that became her favorite movie, and Rey her favorite character. So through her, I was able to see what it really was and what it was doing. So Rebel Girl came from that personal place. It was about her. And even the bass line and beat, the beat's kind of, inspired from a First Nations band in Canada called Tribe Called Red, and we actually asked their manager.
I think I've heard of them. Yeah, they're very good.
They're amazing. They've really defined a new sort of dance music that's like, you know, modern dance meets First Nations music, and it's awesome. It's visceral. It gets people moving. So the concept with Rebel Girl was, I need to find a beat. And I need to find a bass line and a way to make a song that my 9-year-old niece is going to like.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Did she like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, she liked that one.
It's awesome. Well, you know, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Den. I want to thank you for being our special guest. Before we close every show, we like to say a little prayer for the person that's on the show. And if you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and say a little prayer for you right now.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't alien. This is okay.
That's okay. Hey,
very comfortable with that.
That's great. Father God, we thank you for having Den on our show, and we ask that you further open up doors for his career, whether it be in Star Wars and also to launch it more forward into the mainstream media with his other songs. We ask that you take care of him and his band F-105. and just help them share a great journey that only could be made through your great name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen. And I wish the same to you too. You know, God bless you and may the force be with you.
For more information, please visit righteousriffs.com. Follow us on social media at facebook.com/righteousriffs, on Twitter @righteousriffs.